So any other way that you look at it, this Mets team has a lot of holes on it. And it looks like if they were to actually address that with major league ready players, they are going to have to dip into the core of the team. Now, there isn't many contracts that are movable, but there is one in terms of value. I am warning any Mets fans that are watching here that it might crack a nerve or two when we talk about this one. So I advise everyone to take the homegrown goggles off for a second and just hear us out. So here are 3 ways that the Mets can deal Jeff McNeil. I'll let Andrew answer that. Why should the Mets consider moving Jeff McNeil?
Because who else are you going to trade? This team needs a shakeup, and it's 2023. This is last year's batting champion, so that value has skyrocketed since that. And obviously, you gave him a big extension. This was one of the 2 guys the Mets decided to buy out the arbitration years. It's why they don't buy out the arbitration years. Every time they do it, the player ends up sucking. So why move him? Because you need to give Ronnie Mauricio also position. Oh, Jeff McNeil can play left field. Yeah, let's take Jeff McNeil from a position where you can have that light-hitting bat that he does at second base. Let's put him in a position where you need power. Continue to move that weak-hitting bat into a prolific position, and let's put McNeil in the outfield because we can get Ronnie in the lineup. No, you give the spot at second base to Ronnie Mauricio, opens up that path so you don't have to – well, you got Brett playing third, you got Lindor playing second. You're still stuck with Jeff McNeil, giving him, the ability to have a clear path after the deadline, and even with this bad season, he still has some value, and there will be some contenders that could use that second base and use that flexibility because they're better built rosters where, you know what, they can just get a table setter to finish up their roster because the rest of their roster has the power and the perfect positions, and they just need a little more bat control in the 9-hole hitter, which on a good team, Jeff McNeil is your 9-hole hitter. Not on this roster, because the Mets need to blow up this roster and rebuild to an extent. Jeff McNeil could be a piece to get multiple pieces for that future team that they desperately need.
Yeah, I mean, you look up and down the Mets lineup right now, and you see a lot of table setters, and you have a lot of guys who do not hit for power. We've pretty much explained this time and time again. Now, you have a very flexible contract with Jeff McNeil right now. He signed a 4-year, $50 million extension. He has a club option as well. So that contract in itself can be appealing, especially to somebody who just won the batting title and somebody who also can play multiple positions, including the infield and the outfield. How I look at it, there's way too many infielders on this roster, no matter how you see it. The most amount of value you are going to get is out of Jeff McNeil. We are also joined by a big Jeff McNeil supporter. So, Frank, what would drive you to trade Jeff McNeil? Would you do it? Are you still opposed to possibly moving?
When it comes to any player, everyone has a price. You know what I mean? And it really depends on what the Mets get in return. So we'll see what trade packages you guys got for me. I don't know any of them. There's going to be a surprise to me. So all the viewers get to see my raw live reaction. So we'll see what happens. But I will say one counter argument to what Andrew said. I don't think that Jeff McNeil is blocking Ronnie Mauricio. I think that, they've experimented with Mauricio playing second base a little bit in the minor leagues. Hasn't gone well. The guy who's blocking Ronnie Mauricio is Francisco Lindor. I mean, Mauricio's spot is shortstop. And Mauricio's going to have to learn his second position. And I've been saying it, if there's another position he's going to learn, it's going to be third. He's not a second baseman. So, I mean, you could say McNeil's blocking him. If Mauricio was like 3 inches shorter and was playing a half-decent second base, okay, I can understand that. But he's not going to be a second baseman. I think that if they just learn that, okay, maybe Ronnie's a third baseman and maybe let's get Brett Beatty in left field more often and see what we got in both guys at those positions, then maybe there's a scenario where everybody could play and you have that more productive offense. And then maybe a guy like Mark Canha is out of this lineup who's not one of those table setters where you can still have the value of Jeff McNeil, but still have Ronnie Mauricio in the lineup. So I'm not just trading away McNeil for the sake of trading him, and I'm not trading McNeil for prospects. I need McNeil to be traded for proven commodities at positions that the Mets really need, young players that the Mets really need. I'm not trading for prospects because I talked about it, on the live stream that we did, in the other videos that you guys are going to see during the week. The Mets have not shown me they can develop people. I cannot get rid of one of the very few homegrown guys that have been successful as a Met for some lottery tickets that most of the times the Mets do not develop correctly and do not scout correctly. So that's something I can't get with. But if you're giving me proven players at positions the Mets need, I'll consider it. But again, it depends on the overall trade package.
I think that there is definitely a balance between young players and younger players who are proven that we have in some of these trade packages. Now, it's definitely the most flexible possibility. And I can tell you right now that Jeff McNeil, just his contract alone, I just want to place somebody with a younger player. Jeff McNeil is not young. He is 31 years old. From the season that he's had so far, from how much this game has changed, like I have said multiple times, he's going to become an obsolete baseball player. Now, if he was our leadoff hitter, our Luis Ariz, Brandon Nimmo is one of the best of that in baseball. We already have him here for the next 8 years. He's also someone who does hit the ball hard. He does play into this new era of baseball, and Jeff McNeil just doesn't. It makes sense to trade him at this 31-year-old season that you're currently looking. Since we are doing a trade video for trade packages, that means we turn to our Rhino GM.
So let's preface this, because I can already hear the comment section. That's too little. No, because I'm not like our comment section that sees, oh, he's homegrown. Oh, he won a batting title. I'm going to be using the website a lot of people use. I don't think it's the Holy Bible, but I do think it's a good tool. That is MLB trade values. And Jeff McNeil's value, according to the website, that does not take into account any personal love or hatred, and it gives you the value based on position, contract, positional versatility, all of that incorporated. So Jeff McNeil's value by himself is 26.6. So you would like to get that number around. Maybe if it's lower, you can say, oh, the other team's winning. Let's start with the Seattle Mariners, because this is a team that we talked about in a previous video. Could use a potential outfielder, which, again, McNeil gives you that flexibility. Colton Wong has been, for the most part, abysmal for the Seattle Mariners in the Jesse Winker trade in the offseason. And Jeff McNeil is better than Colton Wong. And Seattle is leading the league, I believe, in strikeouts. Listen to the American League in strikeouts. There's so much swing and miss on that team. They need another bat control level guy who can just put the bat on ball and hit him 9. J-Rod back in leadoff spot can give you those 2-run homers. You gotta love it. Seattle Mariners are sending right-handed pitcher Matt Brash, right-handed pitcher Diego Castillo, right-handed pitcher Emerson Hancock, and outfield prospect Zach DeLoach. The New York Mets are sending to Seattle Jeffrey the Gerbil McNeil and Tyler Megill. Why do the Mets do this? Upper-level starting pitching. Matt Brash is already in the big leagues. He's got one of the filthiest sliders. Kind of we still don't know what he is. He can be. He could give you 5 and give you a Tyler McGill start, a 5 and fly, great slider, productive innings, but also can be one of the nastiest relievers. But again, with that razor blade slider, he also has that 96-mile-an-hour fastball. So again, it gives you a kind of swingman option, as well as maybe potential. You give him a full offseason and say, you're a starting pitcher. It was one of the nastiest guys in Double-A for Seattle. Diego Castillo, controllable reliever. Mets going to need those kind of arms. Gun, former Tampa Bay Ray, throws hard, 2-pitch guy. Always good to have relievers. Emerson Hancock, former number 7 overall pick in the 2020 draft, hasn't lived up to the hype, especially in the Mariners system that they've been developing pitching. Bryce Miller, Brian Wu, obviously George Kirby. They have been notorious for developing pitching, and they took Emerson in the 7th round. He's been hanging around in Double-A the last year and a half. So maybe there is something with Hancock that I thought they would move him in the Castillo trade. They held on to him and moved Nuelvi. Was shocked at that point, but lottery ticket, high drafted pedigree, already in Double-A, could be in Triple-A. Again, Mets need upper level pitching that could help them next year, because again, this year is kind of a wash. Maybe you get a bright spot. And then Zach DeLoach, left-handed, second round pick in 2020, got some power potential. And again, you're going to notice a theme in these trades: pitching and outfielders. Again, things the Mets desperately need in their upper levels of the minor leagues. DeLoach can go straight into Triple-A and be the best outfield prospect, minus Alex Ramirez, obviously, who's sitting in High A Brooklyn. But again, it could be a call up away if Marte or someone like that. It's a better option than Abraham Almonte or Tim LeCastro if he was healthy. Tyler McGill is in this trade because he is to the point that he needs to just be in a different team. And if you put Tyler McGill in that Mariners pitching development quietly, because they're in Seattle, they're developing arms out there. Obviously, they fixed Paul Sewald and they fixed Tyler Salcedo's become one of the best lefties in baseball. But they are quietly developing arms that they're not getting the Tampa Bay Rays, the Brewers love of pitching factory. An underrated team that is doing that is the Seattle Mariners, and especially Tyler McGill. The Mets have ruined him at this point. You're trading kind of McGill for two guys. I see it as McGill and Brash for both. You get two guys. It could be better than Tyler McGill for the Mets right now. Down the line, you put McGill in that Mariners pitching lab. Who knows what that could be? But again, you're going to see in a lot of these trades the Mets desperately needing relievers, right-handed pitching starters, and outfielders. That's going to be the main targets for these deals.
It's interesting because, as you know, I've said that right now I want the Mets' priority to be improving the pitching, particularly the young pitching. And I think getting somebody like a Matt Brash is exactly what this team could use. Have another guy, with a live arm that's got really quality stuff, not a guy like we talked about, low 90s with a changeup, something very different. And this team could really use that. A guy who's 25 years old compared to all the 40-year-olds and 37 and 38-year-olds, we have all over the pitching staff on the major league level. So having someone like Matt Brash would really change a lot of that. He's definitely someone I would like to see on this Mets team. Diego Castillo, obviously the Mets bullpen needs help. We'll see what happens there. Anytime this team could also definitely use outfield prospects. That's nothing that they are really, really lacking. Very top heavy. We have Alex Ramirez, and then what? And that's been a problem for a while now, not having young outfielders. The one they had, Pete Armstrong, they traded him away. So it feels like even when they did have some, they find a way to get rid of them. So I think that this accomplishes a few different things as far as you work on getting rotation, bullpen. You get Emerson Hancock, so at least that's another young arm to play with as far as just another guy that maybe you can find some. Because, again, he was a guy that was regarded pretty highly. He was pretty high in that Mariners system around the Luis Castillo trade timeline. He's something that Andrew and I talked about, while the Castillo thing was going on last year. And, it comes down, again, to could the Mets develop him? Like you said, if Seattle has done a good job developing their arms and getting those out of him, if they haven't been able to do it with Emerson, I don't know how much faith I have that the Mets will be able to find it. That's the one thing that kind of concerns me is that, and I did say I want the Mets to take on some projects to see if they could find something like a guy like Emerson Hancock's a perfect example where high regard prospect didn't quite blossom yet. Maybe the Mets could find lightning in a bottle, something like that. But it comes down to, can the Mets finally do that? Can they finally develop somebody? So I like that it has an X factor like that in it. So I do like that it accomplishes a lot of things. Would I do it? I'd have to consider it for sure. I don't know if I'm necessarily oh my gosh, jump on that. It all depends on really what Brash does. I mean, he's the key guy because if he could be a rotation fixture for years to come, that's a big thing. But if we're still on the fence, is he a starter? Is he a reliever? That's a little different. I mean, we talk so much about don't give up too much for relievers. And if your headline pieces are Brash and Castillo, both relievers, that's where it gets a little tough. I mean, you're trading a guy with so much team control like McNeil in exchange for bullpen.
I mean, I look at this trade and I feel like this is something that I would definitely pull the trigger on, but I definitely have some questions in terms of what would the Mets be covering with the Jeff McNeil contract, because there's a lot of young capital that they're getting back. I mean, they're getting some it's not like top prospect like their Julio Rodriguez tier of prospect, but they're getting a good amount of capital back here. So I don't know if Tyler McGill kind of sweetens that deal a little bit of them not covering something. They probably would have to cover a little bit of Jeff McNeil's contract.
If you want to play into that, and maybe it's you drop Deloach, and maybe if it's just all the money, and then maybe if you give him, because McNeil's deal is not an albatross, especially for his position. It's like, what is it, $12 million a year? Like, you pay it down to like $8 a year. You want to do that? Maybe that, like you said, McGill is kind of that sweetener, because I could totally see the Mariners seeing Tyler McGill and making that the next Paul Sewald.
I know that Tyler McGill is going to be better than every single one of the pieces in this trade if he goes to the Mariners, because they know how to actually develop pitching, and they know how to actually play to a pitcher's strengths. I'm aware of that, but I know that Tyler McGill needs to get the fuck away from Jeremy Hefner as soon as possible.
Let's get to number 2, and this is going to piss off Frank about sports the most. This is the one I circled down because this is going to get a very angry response. It involves the crosstown rival, the New York Yankees.
Oh boy, here we go.
Oh,
Let's
God,
hear it.
not the Andy Martino shit.
All you do, I had to sneak it in there. Trading Jeff McNeil straight up. There's no sweetener. Going to the New York Yankees. In exchange, the New York Mets will acquire Clayton Beeter, who the Yankees got in the Joey Gallo trade, has become one of the sneaky winners of the trade deadline last year. Ron Marinaccio, got to get someone in there, and Clark Schmidt, and the Albatross, but the easy to get out of Josh Donaldson, $20 million. Here's relax before the pitchforks come out. Josh Donaldson could easily just be DFA'd, and it's $20 million this season. Steve Cohen's already pissed away how much money in that freaking island of relevancy. But if Josh Donaldson was just to stay on the roster, he is a mutual option. You say no after the season, he is gone. Not having to buy it, you could easily buy out the $20 million on August 1st, or just have him be on the bench once a week against the lefty, playing third base. He's still playing good defense. He's still playing phenomenal defense. Lightning in a bottle, lefty power. Again, once a week, just hit on the bench for 2 months. Then you decline his mutual option, and he's gone. In acquiring that, you get a young, controllable piece in Ron Marinaccio, which is probably the sexiest name to most people. Clark Schmidt, I know, Frank, we can't develop pitching, but a young, controllable starter. Yes, he's not great pitching in a bandbox. Who knows? Get him in a bigger ballpark. And Clayton Beeter, who I think, for me, is the piece in this trade. Obviously, Marinaccio is the big league name, and he's got great stuff. And again, controllable reliever. Beeter is a kind of guy that, again, kind of slept on. Yankee fans are realizing this kid is going to be at least a quality middle rotation piece. He's coming from the Dodgers, who, we know developed freaking everybody. Gavin Stone, Bobby Miller, Landon Knack, who knows what else is coming from the Dodgers. You have two farm systems or teams that I trust to develop pitching just for potentially $20 million this year. 2 months or fucking 24 hours of Josh Donaldson for $20 million.
I do think that McNeil's a perfect fit for the Yankees. I think the Yankees, that's definitely a guy that they could use right now. Obviously, we know the Yankees need more lefties, need more contact hitters, guy that can play a lot of positions. I think you see a really good Jeff McNeil playing in that ballpark in Yankee Stadium. And I think that Marinaccio is very appealing because if you look at his contract, he's not a free agent until 2029 at an insane number, based off his service time and things like that. So he has a lot of value. Clark Schmidt, if this was a couple years ago, I'd be like, well, that's pretty intriguing. But as we know so far, hasn't worked out. Clayton Beeter, I mean, I'm not too familiar with him. I mean, he isn't necessarily he's not top 10. He's not top 10 in the Yankee system, so he's not that big of a deal. But Josh Donaldson, that would be brutal. But then again, Danny Mendick made a start at third base because the Mets were facing the lefty. So I don't think I'd do it. I think, maybe a year from now, if Beeter becomes a little more established and Clark Schmidt figures it out already, then yes. But I can't trust. That's two projects that I'm asking the Mets to work on, and I just can't see them getting that done. Also the fact we're taking on Donaldson's contract. Don't love that piece of it either. It just makes the tax situation even worse. I'd rather spend that money elsewhere. So to me, I'm gonna say no.
Let me sweeten the deal and try to hedge you up here. Let's add Drew Smith to go along with Jeff McNeil in this one.
It helps, but doesn't get it done.
Josh Donaldson's contract, I wouldn't say it's a monstrosity because there's not really much term left on it. There's a mutual option there. The only thing is that he most likely will have to be the hypothetical DFA that we would have to do with Eric Hosmer because, when we had Eric Hosmer coming here for Dom Smith along with Chris Paddock and Emilio Pagan, that was the initial reaction that we were just going to DFA him and buy him out. And that's what I feel like you're going to have to do here because of the amount of infielders they have here. I'm not trying to bring in somebody else here to block out a Ronnie Mauricio or block out a potential Mark Vientos. But if that means that they're just going to pay him, tell him to fuck off, get to pick up the young pitching. 3 of these guys are pretty live arms. I don't think long-term any of them can be high-profile starters, but they could be good for the depth chart in the bullpen. If it is just McNeil going alone, and that means we can kind of get, one player into 3 players of you can never have enough pitching, it's hard to say. You're kind of doubling the Cano money here. Is there any buyout in the mutual option? I think
a $3 million buyout.
That I'm kind of 50-50 on. I would understand why they would do it, but if Josh Donaldson's going to be on the team and play here, I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. And even though I do want power, this guy is he's nowhere. He's gone. He's far gone. He's done. I don't really think transferring from one New York team to another, two very angry fan bases right now, would work out very well. I mean, one of my main points was let's move McNeil so we can make this infield younger. We can make this lineup younger. And then we're like, oh, let's bring in Josh Donaldson, who's 85 years old.
Let's get to the final trade. And for me, my most interesting one to a team who can use some value at second base, who's had a surprise, and that is the Baltimore Orioles. A team on the rise, plenty of young talent, a little bit of lefty power, but, could use that one last piece, and they have Adam Frazier starting at second base, a utility piece. So giving Jeff McNeil the everyday role in Baltimore at second base, up the middle with Gunnar Henderson and Adley, could be give a little Yankee fan a little nightmare. And this is a team that has what the Mets need in outfielders. The Mets would acquire their number 4 prospect, Heston Kjerstad, and their number 9 prospect, both outfielders, Dylan Beavers, for Jeff McNeil. Why do you do this? One, Heston Kjerstad is finally living up to that number 2 overall pick potential. We all know why the Baltimore Orioles took him. It wasn't because he was the second best player in the draft. The Orioles made it clear, and they loved it. They did it with Jackson Holliday. They might have hit a bomb with that one, but they love going under slot value. But Heston Kjerstad, beginning of last season and continuing into this season in AAA, is back to looking like, hey, this kid deserves to be a second overall pick. Left-handed bat. Power is going to come. He hasn't had crazy power numbers, but he's extra base hits machine, double machine. Again, what do the Mets need desperately? Upper level outfield prospects. And Kjerstad, again, the outfield in the Orioles system is absolutely ridiculous. Colton Cowser, Dylan Beavers, Heston Kjerstad, 2 other guys. And their big league outfield is pretty crowded already. Austin Hayes is maybe the most underrated player in baseball. Nobody talks about him. Cedric Mullins, Anthony Santander, a guy we all of us kind of love. And then Dylan Beavers, who was a 2022 comp first-round pick, 33 overall. Right now in Aberdeen in a plus ball, 18 homers. We like homers. Doesn't hit for good batting average, so Frank might not like him. But get a guy who's in AAA, who you can easily call up at any time. And then another guy who's in a same level as Aram. So you get a guy for now, potentially, and then you get a guy for the future, building that outfield depth, building that prospect capital. Hey, now we got a couple of outfielders to build around as well with this infield of the conglomerate of infield prospects. Hey, now we got some outfield prospects to build. Again, are we going to have all these guys on the roster? No. But again, for trades, continuing to build up draft capital at every spot in baseball, pitching, outfield, infield.
It's interesting because the Mets need outfielders, and they're going to need them really soon. I mean, when you think about it, Tommy Pham, he's here for a year. Mark Canha, probably a year. Starter Marte, we're already talking about maybe trading him too. And with the way the Mets minor league system is right now with outfielders, where are the outfielders going to come from? I mean, who will be the Mets outfielders 3 years from now? I mean, you'll have Nimmo out there, hopefully Alex Ramirez, and then who's the other spot? I mean, are you just going to keep having a revolving door of veterans in one of those corners? So I think that having, young guys that you could build on build through the young players at good salary numbers, all of the field, that's the best way to build the team, because then you can invest in pitching, but invest in young pitching for multiple years, not the 2 40-year-olds at the top of the rotation. It would allow you to do things like that, extend Pete Alonso. You got to save money elsewhere if you want to be realistic, because we're not going to spend like drunken sailors and all this other stuff. So I do like adding more young outfielders, but I don't love doing it at the expense of McNeil, just because, again, it's like you said, the guy's the number 2 pick in the draft, but hasn't lived up to it quite yet. So I think that no matter what, a lot of prospects, they are lottery tickets. And I'm never of the belief of, if a guy was a good Met, you get rid of him for a lottery ticket. It's a risk. Hopefully it would pay off. That the outfielders do live to their potential. They are mainstays for the Mets. But I think that it's just too risky for me. I like that Seattle, the guys were a little more proven, guys like Brash and players like that. Emerson Hancock, I'm more familiar with than the Baltimore prospects. So for me, I would pass. I'm not willing to take that risk.
Perfect example. You trade Luis Arraez, you're not getting much more than this. Like, oh, he hits 400. He's like they play second. Well, he's a first baseman, which makes even less sense why the Marlins have it first. Like, his value is a second baseman, cool, but like you're not getting in case of the Dodgers, let's say Diego Cartaya or Bobby Miller and that. So you're not getting that. You're in the same class as Jeff McNeil. Landon Knack, Andy Pages. I'm using the Dodgers as an example. He isn't this, oh my God, batting champ, Jesus Christ type return. You're not banking on that. If Eduardo Escobar is going to top 21 prospect, I think one of the other guy was 21 and then obviously 19. McNeil's probably going for 2 top 15s, or maybe 1 top 10. So again, the value of being able to fill positions of need, and especially when you have a guy who is made for today's game, who needs a position. And I'm not putting Jeff McNeil in the outfield. Like, his value, he's even worse value-wise in the outfield because you need power to play the outfield. And he's not great defensively out there. He's, he could put him there. His value goes down even more playing in the outfield. Shake the core. This core of this team is locked in to an extent. Nimmo, Lindor, McNeil, Alonso still be determined. Nobody's taking that Lindor contract on. Nimmo's been one of your best consistent players. Shake it up. And obviously we want the pitchers to get traded. It's unlikely those $40 million deals are going to get moved. So if that's not going to happen, and it's not like, oh, let's just trade the rentals. You want to shake that locker room and say, hey, oh shit, we need to get our crap together. This is the most likely piece. He's good in small sample sizes. He can win you a game or two, throughout the season. But he's not a pillar. He's not a face of the franchise. He's co-star. Nothing wrong with that. But he could be moved. And I get it, fan favorite, whatever. I see it as, hey, have an asset, turn that one asset into 4, 3 or 4, especially in a lost season.
It's hard to trade your favorite player. Even though at the time trading Beltran for Wheeler made sense, I didn't love seeing Beltran leave. So I'm never going to be like, oh, I'm thrilled that the Mets are going to trade Jeff McNeil as a fan. I never want to say it happen, but I do think there is something to be said that the core, it just hasn't gotten it done.
As the time goes on and they continue to underperform as they have, and they still have yet to win anything with this core, they got to shake up something. This is definitely your most movable piece.